Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of RoboReplay, and in this one I wanted to go over two matches that I saw from DCMP that I think might have strategies that might show up at Worlds at some point, as well as do a little bit of a breakdown of only the Curie division here, but we'll be talking about using the Curie division to try to predict how alliance selection will work at Worlds in general overall. Let's get into it. So first off, I do want to point out that the reason that I did not make a video and I'm not going to have nearly as much actual replay content this week is because I had finals and final projects to work on. Sorry about that, guys, but so I do not have nearly as much time as I did the prior weeks to put out videos, which is why we're only going to be covering two matches this week rather than like a whole plethora of them that we normally would. But to look at what I think will happen for Worlds, let's just get right into it. We'll be using Curie as an example, which is, to be fair, one of the strongest divisions overall, but I think it's a good example of what might be happening in elims for every single division. So we'll be using Statbotics for this, and I do want to make one assumption here, which is that everyone's going to rank where they're predicted to land here. So like in terms of total EPA, like 1, 2, 3, and then the alliances are just going to be these guys picking each other, which obviously is a very bold prediction that will not happen at all. People are going to move up and down the ranks, and these stats are not final. People will pick based off whatever they want to pick off, but we'll just be using this as an example for what I think will happen at Worlds. So in my estimation, if we're looking at the alliance 1 to 4, right, so from these guys down to guys over here, then I have a feeling that people will just pick the strongest overall robot, right? Maybe you have a 4-piece, maybe you have a 3-piece. Doesn't really matter. If you can score high in Telly, we're just going to pick you. And I think that most alliances, this is one in which there are not a lot of robots that can't do algae. But in other divisions, there are a lot of robots that are really strong at Coral, but not that strong at algae. And I think that we'll see a lot of what 254 and 2910 did in terms of strategy, which is where you have one robot that, let's say, if these two pick each other, 3005 and 7457, you have one robot doing a bunch of algae first, so that we, 1, get off the ground, get off the reef, and also 2, make it so that the other alliance isn't able to steal our algae and make our maximum amount of points that we can get more limited than what it already is. So I think that you'll see one of these guys just doing algae a bunch of the time, and then the other one will just be hard focusing coral, right? How many coral cycles can we do? And then I feel like that's how you'll go down to maybe the 4th captain, and then at the 5th captain, I wouldn't be surprised if you have a robot like this, right? Let's say a pretty solid coral scoring robot like 27 or 3663, and then what they do is they're like, well, we want one of the best algae robots in the game because we just want them to only focus at algae. We think that our field is deep enough where our 5th second pick is going to be a good enough coral score to make up the difference. So they take like this or this 103 at 3100, and then you go down a little bit more, and then you'll get to the 8th seed, at which point they'll probably just be playing in general just triple offense, right? Which I think is the main thing I want people to take away from this, is that I think that triple offense is probably going to be what most people play at elims. And I think that we talked a lot about defense, right? Defense is a very strong strategy. However, you have to, 1, execute it good, right? The only reason someone's going to be picking you as a defense robot is if they think that you can shut down one of the best robots on the field. As people who are taking defense robots are taking you, 1, to win the field because they want upset potential against, like in Alliance 1. So like, for example, 359 might take a defense robot against, if they're going to play the Alliance 1, because they're like, well, our total points are less than their total points combined, right? Let's say that 359, 1706 are together. Us 2 versus them 2 are lower, and if they play triple offense and you play triple offense as a second pick, we won't be able to best them. So instead, we're going to use a second pick, and we're going to send them over, and maybe you can chunk this score down to where we can make it up. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that we'll see in general throughout the elims, is that if you are an alliance 1 to 4 and you have the liberty of being able to select a robot that has a defense capability first, because of the fact that your scoring is so high, right? So for example, what I mean by that is if you go to the 8th alliance, that would be where? Around 20, 19, 18, 17, 16. So let's say these guys are the 8 alliance. Let's say these 3 in general are the 8 alliance. Sure. And then these guys are now at what, 210 EPA, and they are essentially locked into having to play triple offense because they are just, they don't think that they can make up the difference unless they play triple offense against these guys who are almost 200 EPA just by themselves in offense, right? So if you have the liberty of being able to choose your third robot for any strategy, whether it be triple offense or just defense. So, for example, if you're like 359 or 1771, where your score isn't that far behind the Alliance 1, but is a little bit lower, then I think that's where you'll see a lot of teams going with defense, where you take defense and you're like, okay, we're going to pick a defense robot first as the second alliance's third pick is going to be a defense robot first. We're going to take the best one off so that Alliance 1 doesn't get them. And then with our third pick, we'll take the best offense robot that's available now at this point, because we think that we might want to play triple offense in some matches. So those matches, for example, would be like if 2 plays 7 first round, that's a match where you should be easily winning. You don't need to play defense in that match. If you just go triple offense, 7 has to go triple offense against you, and then you just outscore them because you have a better alliance overall. And I think that's what you'll see for the earlier rounds, and then the later rounds is where we'll see the defense start to get pulled in, your third robot, your fourth robot, maybe you switch them each out, and you say, okay, depending on what alliance we're playing, we'll put a defense robot against you, we'll play triple offense against you, and it's I think that is what's going to make the strategy of Elims really, really interesting to look at, is seeing how people create their alliances to mix those two different strategies and trying to just completely outthink the other alliance in terms of what strategy you're running. But other than that, I think defense is, in general, strong, but not strong enough to warrant just being always out there if you're just a defense robot, right? I think that you'll definitely see, if you're an Alliance 1 third pick or fourth pick, you'll definitely see yourself getting swapped out if you're being a just defense bot. And another thing, right, if you're going to try to be those Alliance first picks, second picks, we saw 2910 pull out the Lollipop Auto, as I think it's been coined at this point. 359, I'm sure, has it with a very similar style of robot. I know 2481 has it because of their reveal video. But one of the biggest things, if you have a robot like that, a 359, a 2910, 2481, if you see a robot that is doing the 4-piece while going to the backside and pick up the ground pieces, then the best thing you can do to present yourself as a pick for that alliance is have like a 3-piece, right? If you're a second pick that's fallen to these guys and you're like, hey, we have a really consistent 3-piece and we'll play some dang good defense for you, then you have a really good auto score, and let's say you have a deep climb, that's another 12 points. You've already contributed like 40 points worth at that point to your alliance, and then you just go play defense and knock the other score. It's a perfect robot for you to pick. I think that doing some pre-scouting, if you're trying to be a second pick, you're trying to go onto a Worlds Playoffs Alliance, then doing some pre-scouting, seeing what teams you think will do a second pick, and then seeing, hey, do we want to do the 1153 strategy of we're going to do Algae in auto, because we think that our alliance is just going to set up like this, where these guys are just going to go to the reef, and sorry, that's supposed to be reef, and they're just going to do their 2 pieces, and then we'll go here and we'll do our Algae in the barge, and we'll do another one. That's one strategy of just autos, and then the other one, obviously the 2910, is to be these guys go in the back, and then you can do yours. And I think that that is where pre-scouting really comes in handy. I would suggest everybody pre-scout if you're trying to be on a playoffs alliance. Check out which teams do you think will have this backside auto, and then it'll allow you to figure out, hey, what do we want to show off in qual matches? As if you're trying to be a second pick of an alliance and you don't think that you'll end up as a first pick of any alliance just by scoring enough, then what do you care about ranking, right? Rank matches, or qual matches rather, in Worlds aren't giving you anything in terms of district points or regional points. So just showing yourself off, figuring out how do you want to show people that you are a good robot to pick is the best way to. This is the best way to do it. I think that if you're trying to get picked on any alliance, that showing yourself off in your best light is how you're going to do that. And just going into Worlds with a mindset of this is what we want to do to show ourselves off and make sure that we get picked is a great strategy for any team looking to get picked. Now with that, let's jump to our first match of this 2-match series. we're going to be checking out Team 11 and the FMA District Championship Finals. So here we are at the FMA District Championships. This is the finals match 1. Alliance 2 would end up winning this entire thing at the end of this. And right now they are a little bit down in terms of auto points, but we'll see that they make it up, and let's see how they do it. So I want to point out the strategy that they use here is of Team 11 going over to the other side and just stealing algae. I think is one of the best strategies that you can do in terms of playing defense and doing algae. And obviously in this case, as we'll see, Team 11 doesn't play nearly as much defense as I expected. And in other matches later on, they would end up going to the other side and stealing a lot more algae than they do here. But having a robot that does algae and just having them take over this role of being the robot on this side is a great choice, I think. Especially if the robots are not clearing up their lollipops that fast. You can sit here, you can defend the ground intake while also collecting algae, and then go put that into the barge. Another thing I want to note is that because 11 is being their main algae scorer, 3314 is doing a bunch of it as well, but 11 is doing most of it, that they left the lollipops up at the end of this, which is something that we saw 3005 and 148 do in week 1, actually, when they did the high score the first time. And I think it's a very smart choice to do that. In this case, on the Blue Alliance, they ended up knocking down their cones, and you can see that the teleop score is evening out a lot more, even though their auto score was a bit higher for the Alliance 1. And then 11 gets stuck here, right? Unlucky, but I think that this strategy in general is a great strategy. And then we see that after they're done with stealing as much algae as they want, and then they just come back, do some coral, and they go hit the climbs. And I do think that going into Worlds, I mean, even going to District Champs, like, in New England specifically, there's a Team 571 who is an incredible coral scorer, right? They absolutely could have been picked, and honestly should have been on an alliance of some sort, but because of the fact that they didn't have a deep climb, no one wanted to pick them, because the last 12 points that you get at the end there are so crucial for any alliance winning. And then we'll see at the end here, right, just exactly how important it is. I think 3142, we can see their bumper barely touching the ground here. And then Red Alliance gets a triple climb in the last 5 seconds, right? Very, very ballsy move, but it works out for them. And then we see, right, they win just off of that climb. And this climb is so important. If you are not able to secure this 36 points, then it's just lost. And the reason why it's so hard to do that, to win even without the climb, is because of the fact that when you have a reef that's as full as this, right? So let's take a look at the blue reef. When you have a reef that's as full as this one, you now have, let's say, 2 L2s left. So your climb is worth, essentially, compared to your park, right? So it's a 10-point difference between a park and a climb. So 10 points is 5 coral cycles here. That is 5 teleop cycles for the price of 1 climb. And I think that just being able to hit the climb in terms of points is just too valuable. Especially when you're doing it, like we can see that the Blue Alliance goes a little bit early because they think they have a really good lead. Especially when you're doing it at like such a late time, like this Alliance 2 is going to end up doing, right? Let's see. When do they actually get on together? The cage gets in 11 at 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. They go up at 3 seconds and they hit the climb at the end there. And being able to do that and being able to like do something like 11 did at the end here is slam a coral in the ground, go whisk yourself over, hit the climb with like 3 seconds left, is going to be one of the most important skills for any robot, as I think that idea of hitting a score and going over could easily be translated into the same way of playing some climb defense and then go hitting a climb, right? You play some defense here, make them go early, as we saw in this, they went early by themselves, and because of that, they didn't get an extra coral piece, and then they weren't able to win the match. But just having a strategy like what 5409 did of sit in front of here, make them go, and then go hit a climb is going to be one of the biggest strategies that I think teams might end up pulling out if they're predicted to lose, or if they're down in the middle of the match and need to make up points somehow. In the past, in Worlds, we've seen that climbs and forcing people to climb early has been a really big piece of games. Notwithstanding 2024, because of the fact that 2024 was just the climbs in that game were just not well made, well designed in terms of point values. But in games before that, like 2017, for example, saving your score ends up being a really big thing. And what I mean by that, saving your score, is having a game piece that you haven't scored yet that will make your score that you see over here get boosted a bunch. And so uh, we saw that in the Ontario district, people were keeping 2 processors here so that you could get an 8-point boost at the end of the match. In this case, I think that Alliance 2 was trying to do this, but ended up with not enough time to. They had an L4 sitting here that they didn't score. And I think that if you're doing that, that's a great strategy. Because an L4 here, like, let's assume that, for example, 11 was doing the strategy of we're going to leave this 1 up, and instead of putting their 1 in L1, they put their coral in L4 at the end there. This score would now jump to a 203 when they expected it to be a much closer match than it was before. And so then you force them to climb early, and at this point they're not able to score more telly. You can slam out like a 10-point boost if you leave 2 L4s open, and then you can go hit a climb, and then you win the match because they climbed early and they can't make up that gap because of the fact that they went early to just go hit the climb, right? And if you want a really good example of this, look at the Einstein Finals of 2023 of supercharging. What teams were doing were literally just pre-supercharging a bunch of different nodes, or L1s, not L1s, what was it called that year? It was lows. They're putting a bunch of double cubes into lows without finishing the last piece. And then, like, at 2 seconds left, they throw the last piece on, go hit a charge station, triple engage, and then their score would go from like a 180 to like all of the supercharged nodes that weren't counted before would all get counted together, and their score would jump by 30. And this is actually how I think the 1323 and 4414 alliance won that year, was that they forced the other alliance to think that they had to climb early, or because they could just secure the win if they climbed, and then they put the node in, the score jumps by way higher than they thought it was, and at that point, if you're the other alliance, you're just sitting there waiting to lose, and you can't do anything about it. So another strategy that I thought was really good, and let's talk about the final strategy that I saw in the Minnesota regional that happened this week. So here we are at the North Star regional. This is just a very good match. I liked the barge got filled in this one. I just want to talk about it a bit of how it happened, and I do want to point out one thing on this alliance of Alliance 3 is that 2169 over here is a algae shooter. They are an algae shooter, and instead of shooting algae this match, they actually specifically choose to only process it. I think it's a really good anti-strat, really good example of what you should be doing in elims, of looking at your other alliance, seeing what they're doing, and trying to counter them. I think it's a great idea in general. So we'll see that 2169 has a shooter that is a flywheel, I think, that they have on their robot, and they choose to just process all their stuff because we saw 3100 on the Curie division in terms of Statbotics, and you can see it here, right? They're going to do a bunch of algae into the barge. And so what they did was they looked at this human player, and I'm assuming what they did is what they looked as this human player, and let's see their form here, right? We saw 1678 doing the perfect toss of putting backspin on it and making it so that the algae was basically never falling out. And I'm assuming they saw this human player, looked at the form, and saw how it was underhand toss and said, okay, we'll just put a bunch of algae in the processor because we think that they'll miss a lot more than they'll make because their form isn't good. And we can see already there's 1 miss, and that's another 4 points given to the Red Alliance just off of that. And then they can score it again. I think it was a great strategy overall to just do that. I liked watching it a lot, but I think the biggest takeaway from this is that, one, you should be watching whoever's you're playing next, always watch them, make sure that you know what strategy they're running, and if you have something like this where you see, oh, they're not throwing the ball algae correctly, I think that we can catch them off of that and do a bunch of processor and just win the match from that, then telling your alliance that running that strategy is a great idea, and just trying to find anti-strategies is how you win playoff matches, right? Looking at alliance saying, oh, I think that their intake isn't that good, maybe it's flimsy, we can play defense and target these guys, which is just like common sense to some people, but like just actively examining other alliances, trying to find weaknesses in robots is one of the best ways to win your matches. And I think that it is a just incredible way to do it. I do want to point out, after 2169 is done, they do play some defense at the end here after all the algae is removed. I think that it's a great choice of doing that. And I also think that if these guys are at Worlds, you might see a lot more of them in playoffs, because being able to like steal an algae, do what 11 was doing, pick up an algae off the ground on their side, flywheel it in, and then go back to playing defense is a great thing that you can do on any alliance at Worlds, and I think that that's how it's probably going to get played in terms of algae denial. And I think that 11's strategy of going all the way over here did mean that they dropped a bunch of defense that they could have been playing, but on the other hand, they were coming over to their own side a bunch. So it's a trade-off, right? On one side, you have the 2169 strategy of we're just going to steal as much algae as we can and then go play defense only. And on the other side, it's 11 strategy of we're only going to stay here so that we can take algae and put it in our barge, and then we're going to go score a coral. It's two different strategies. I have a feeling that we'll see both of them getting played. I don't think one is better than the other. It just depends on, do you think there's defense that you can play on a robot? Do you think that you just need triple offense to win? And it's really just heavily dependent on that and your own situation. And with that, I just wanted to thank you guys for watching this entire season. We're going to Worlds. Unbelievable to me that there's going to be a world champion crowned in less than a week at this point. So thank you guys for watching this entire season. I will absolutely be putting out videos at Worlds. I will be at Worlds as well, so if you don't see videos on Thursday or Friday, that's why. I don't think I'll be able to put out videos during Worlds, sadly, because I will be actively mentoring my team there. But please let me know with all the matches you guys found interesting at Worlds. I'm sure there's going to be so many good matches, so much good strategy going on in general at this event, because this game is just bound to have some great anti-strategies set up, bound to have some great counters, and just great strategy in general. Hope to see you there. Good luck if you're going to Worlds, and have a lovely day.